Hello, everybody. Welcome back. If you've been watching some of my other videos, you know it's been a while since we've posted things. It gets a little crazy with the holidays and some other things that have been going on, but we are back. Today we're going to talk about roles. It's exactly what it says. This is kind of like your role in life, your role in the family, the role in the workplace, just really kind of diving into those roles. We're going to do this using what's called family systems theory. If you are a part of the therapy community, or if you've ever done any like marriage and family counseling, you might have heard that term before. So like always, we're going to go ahead and dive right in. At the end of this, I will provide my email if you have any additional questions, comments, concerns, or would like some additional information on this. You can also email me for a session. If you get done with this and you really just want to do something more one-on-one, you can go ahead and email me for that information of how to go ahead and get that set up. Okay, so understanding roles. You heard me mention family systems theory. This is kind of how I teach this. And all it is again, exactly what it says. It's a family system theory. Okay, so this is a theory that kind of looks at the intertwining of family members and other members of someone's quote unquote system. Okay, so when I do this in individual therapy, I like to tell everybody I use this by using like an old bicycle wheel. And so I say, I have a wheel, you have a wheel, you have a wheel, and I go around to each person and say, that's our individual system. So everybody has a separate system, but then everybody is kind of intertwined in that one system. Okay, so this theory explains how the interconnectedness of your system impacts the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of other individuals within the system, including yourself. So if you have not watched my video on cognitive behavioral therapy, that's a good overview before you go into this. That just explains thoughts, feelings, behaviors a little bit more. However, you do not need the cognitive behavioral therapy video to do this one. My other videos you can see go in order. I think it's number 1 through 13 because that has kind of a cadence to it. This is totally freestanding. You don't have to watch the other videos for this one. So you can understand this one without watching the other ones. Okay, so family systems theory, just remember, everybody in your family creates one giant system, but then everybody has their own individual systems. Again, I use this to teach this using a bike wheel, as you can see on the screen. Okay, so just an old bike wheel. So this is your system. And remember, you have a system, your husband, each one of your kids, your cousin, your aunt, your grandma, everybody has their own individual system. So each spoke in the bicycle represents a different part of your system. So for example, one of my spokes could be me and my father. Another one could be one and my daughter. Another one could be one and my other daughter. Another spoke could be my 2 children. Another spoke could be me and my grandma, me and my mom, me and my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, like so on and so forth. Whoever is in your system, every single person represents a different spoke. So as you can imagine, people have pretty big systems and there's a lot of interconnectedness going on. When I do this in individual therapy or with a family, I actually will print out a bike wheel, and it usually doesn't have this many spokes on it because it can get confusing when you're first starting to do this. So I will print out one that's maybe got 10 spokes on it, and I will actually have them take that either in session or home, and they will actually start to write out the most intermediate people in their system. Okay, so if I send this home with one of my teenagers, they're probably going to come back and one spoke is going to be them and mom, them and dad, them and brother, them and sister. And then maybe if there's any other family living with them, maybe a partner like a boyfriend or a girlfriend or anybody else that's kind of living with them, I like to say that's your immediate. So the people that you're kind of in day-to-day contact with is, I like to say, is your immediate system. That is where I like to start first before we start branching out, because as you can look at this wheel, if we started with this, it would be really, really hard to get to the core of what this activity, like what the meaning is. So if you are going to do this, I suggest starting very small. You do not have to have a wheel. You can just use a piece of paper and write down all the people. I just kind of like the depiction of the wheel. You'll see why, because there's one very specific reason why I use a wheel. Okay, so every single spoke represents a kind of like a different person. And as you can see, this wheel, all of these spokes kind of meet in one core place, the center. Okay, I like to call this your role. So every single one of these spokes is attached to the middle. The middle is our role. If we do not understand our role, that is when the system essentially kind of starts to weaken and get brittle and kind of fall apart. This is where you see tension within the family or relationships arise. Okay, so what I mean by that, if one of your spokes is you and your partner, you and your spouse, we'll say, and you guys get in a fight about money, what I have found as a therapist, money is not the issue. The role set behind the money becomes the issue. For example, let's say that the wife is a stay-at-home mom and her role as a mom is to take care of the kids and to pay all of the bills. Let's say that it's dad's job to go to work and make the money, but he doesn't do anything with the money. The stay-at-home mom, the wife, does everything with the money. Okay, so now let's say something comes up. Let's say that they get a bill in the mail from a doctor's office and it's 10:30 at night and the husband gets up and pays that bill. Okay, well, what if the next morning the wife wakes up and also pays that bill and they've got double the money that came out of their account and they start to fight over money? Well, now we're short $300 for this bill and blah, 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 and it turns into a fight. What happens is they're going to come to therapy. I mean, if they come to therapy with me, and I'm going to let them know right off the bat, money is not your issue. One of you overstepped your role, and then it caused tension for the other person. So, for example, in this situation, the husband overstepped his role. If your role is not to deal with money, don't touch it, because all you did now was create tension with your wife, your spouse, and now her thought process is riddled with errors. Again, if you haven't watched my videos on thinking errors, feel free to do so. Her emotional state is probably pretty stressed and frustrated, and her behavior could become she starts to snap at other people around her. Money was never the issue. Okay, so what happens when you and your spouse kind of get in an argument is, imagine that spoke between you and your spouse, it kind of starts to get a little bit weakened. Okay, over time, if a lot of your spokes are weakened, and this is a real bike, your bike ride is not going to go very smooth. Okay, the goal is to keep your spokes as solid as possible at all times by understanding what your role is. Okay, we're going to do more on roles in the next couple of slides just to really kind of hone into what this means. But I want you, number one, if you're going to do this activity, step one, get a bike wheel or a piece of paper and just write your intermediate people in your life. Okay, after you've done that, go through and kind of write down some of the possible tensions that you have with some of those people. Okay, I will give you a personal example. One of my spokes is me and my oldest daughter. I have two girls. Okay, I have two daughters. One of them is a teenager, one of them is a preteen, but my teenager works in fast food right now. My role, so me and her have one spoke. Okay, my role, and it has been discussed, my role is to do laundry. No ifs, ands, or buts. That is my role. We don't ever have to talk about it. That is my role, to stay on top of the laundry for both me and my children. That is a role that I have taken on. So if I go and I don't do the laundry for whatever reason, and I don't communicate that I need someone to take on that role for the week because of X, Y, and Z, if I don't communicate that and I don't do the laundry and my daughter needs her uniform for work and she gets upset with me, and I get defensive and say, well, this and this and this was going on, it's like, no, pause. You didn't communicate your role. If you were sick or if something came up, all you had to do was go to the other person and say, hey, I can't get to this week. Or do you mind taking that on for me just for this week? And then I will take the dishes from you, whatever it is. Okay, that is my role. It doesn't change. But if I do not complete that role, and it's going to cause tension for her because now she doesn't have a clean uniform for work, she's frustrated because she's going to have to wear a uniform that she's already wore. And if you've ever worked in fast food or have a child that works in fast food, you know, you really don't want to wear your uniform twice in a row because you come home smelling like the restaurant. So then she's going to be frustrated. As a teenager, she's probably going to be pretty embarrassed because teenagers like to, you know, be very clean, and they have this image that they like to uphold. So it can get very, very ugly, all because I didn't uphold my role. Okay, I see this in families and relationships all the time. Relationships, marriages, friendships, families don't fall apart because of what they're arguing about. They fall apart because they don't understand their role, and there's typically not a lot of accountability taken with that role. Honestly, I see this a lot just simply because people don't know what they don't know is really what it comes down to. But in the next couple of slides, you're going to learn some of the key things that I have seen in therapy that people quote unquote fight over is really not even the problem at all. It's they don't understand their role. And then that spoke starts to get a little bit weakened as we go. Okay. So now some of the roles that I have seen as a therapist, there are 3 big ones. Okay. Some of this has to do with just the family unit. Some of this does have to do with relationships, marriages. Okay. The very first one, the number one that I see is money. Arguments over finances typically have nothing to do with money itself. Nothing. Just like I explained in the last example with the husband and the wife, money was never the issue. The husband overstepped his role. That became the issue. Okay. In the slides, you're going to see a little bit about overcompensation. I did not mention that in the last slide, but I will mention it here. What starts to happen when you don't complete your role or you don't understand your role and there's tension within the family or your system itself? And like, for example, me and my daughter, if I don't do the laundry and that spoke starts to kind of dwindle a little bit, right? Because now she's frustrated with me. She might lose trust in me. A lot of things can happen. And that spoke kind of dwindles. What happens is when some of your other spokes start to dwindle, you essentially start to overcompensate in other areas. So if you think of this as an actual bike wheel, and some of your spokes are loose or just, they're kind of wobbly, your other spokes now have to overcompensate. The same thing happens in the body, right? If I break my right arm, my left arm is going to have to significantly overcompensate because I've lost this or this is injured. It's no different in your system. So here I'm going to list some of the roles and the arguments that I've seen and then what overcompensation can look like. Okay. So money, I've already given an example of that. Money is typically never the issue. The overcompensation can look like someone who quote unquote buys love. So they use money to avoid expressing emotions. They can buy things that aren't necessarily necessary to bring peace to the system. So an example of this would be, let's go back to that example with the husband and the wife. Okay. So the husband pays the bill when that wasn't his role. It was the wife's role. She gets up the next morning, pays the bill, and all hell kind of breaks loose later in the day. Well, what this would look like, an overcompensation would look like the husband goes out and buys the wife flowers and brings them home, but never talks about the role issue. I'm not saying it's not okay for you to go buy your spouse flowers and apologize, but you damn well better get to the root of why it happened, or it's just going to be a cycle. Okay. I am totally okay with buying somebody a gift to apologize, but you also need to have a conversation of why it happened, and then maybe sit down and rediscuss what that role looks like, right? So someone that comes home and buys flowers and is like, I'm so sorry, that won't happen again. What does that, I don't know what that means. What won't happen again, right? Like, and as a female, I don't want to speak for all females, but I can attest, I'm telling you, women would rather sit down and have a conversation and get everything out and everything smoothed over than just get flowers. And I'm not going to speak for everybody, but the majority of women, myself included, I would think that's what they would want. Okay. If you are going to bring home flowers and say, I am so sorry for paying that bill, I completely overstepped that. I should have communicated with you. Hey, this bill came through. I just wanted to make sure you saw it. And the wife, you know what? I actually did see that. I was going to pay it tomorrow. Thanks for the heads up. Or, hey, I noticed this bill came through. I didn't realize I didn't know if you didn't have time to pay it. So I went ahead and paid it. I just wanted to let you know. I know that usually that's your role, but I just saw it and I had some time. So I wanted to communicate that to you. Then you can buy them something. That's great. But don't just quote unquote buy your love. We probably could also look at our system and see somebody along the family line that does that, causes a lot of arguments within the family, and then tries to buy toys or flowers or this or that for other people, but never talks about the issue. Okay. So that is one of the biggest role things that I see that causes a problem. Next one, intimacy and sex. If you are too young to have engaged in that, because I do have some clients that are teenagers that I will do this activity with. If you are too young to be intimate or sexually active, you can go ahead and skip over this part. If you're interested in it, I try to keep it as professional as possible, but this is a big, big, big one that I see in session. So I definitely wanted to include it here. Okay. So arguments over intimacy and sex typically have nothing to do with intimacy and sex itself. Okay. Usually never. For example, if a wife was sexually assaulted as a child, she grows up, she gets married, and it comes time to be intimate with her partner. And at times she's very uncomfortable with it, and she kind of avoids that and pushes it off and doesn't want to do that. A lot of people can see, well, it's like, well, you don't ever want to have sex with me. You don't ever want to be intimate with me. Like, I can't live like that. And it becomes a problem. And the fight becomes about intimacy and sex when that's not the core problem at all. Typically, the core problem is core beliefs and memories that have not been processed that leads to arguments and avoidance. Okay. Sex is not the problem. Intimacy is not the problem. Your role within that is the problem. And I do not say this to be mean, but if a woman and or a man has been sexually assaulted and they're going to get into a relationship and avoid, then you probably shouldn't be in a relationship. And I know there's a lot of people that are married that struggle with this. So again, I do not say it to be mean. Those of you that see me in person and know me know, yes, I can be harsh, but it is all out of love because I don't want to see people live the way that they've been living. And sometimes that takes some tough love. If you are going to avoid intimacy and sex as a married person because of your past traumas, that is not your partner's problem. That is your problem, and it is so fixable. It is 100% fixable. Same with men. If you've been sexually assaulted, or say you sexually assaulted somebody else, and now you're going to avoid that with your spouse, big problem, and it's not their problem. Don't make it their problem. Do not make that their role. That is your role to get that figured out. Okay? It has nothing to do with the intimacy and sex itself, typically. The overcompensation of this can look like someone who shares personal information way too quickly, someone that initiates sex simply just for like self-soothing measures and not connection. So for example, if you are in a marriage and let's say that you don't feel safe with your spouse necessarily because of some previous things that have happened and you have not processed those. And so you kind of start to avoid that, but your body is still craving sexual things. So if you go and initiate sex with your partner and there's no connection there, that's overcompensation. You're just compensating to get a physical release, but there's no connection there, which that can cause a really big problem because your role is no longer, oh, I'm having sex or being intimate with this person because I love them and I'm connected to them and I want to share that with them. It's, I'm doing this for myself because I want to release. That can cause a really, really, really big problem. And is that your role in a marriage? If it is, I would argue that marriage needs some work, is what I would argue. Okay. Another huge one I see, housework. Arguments over housework typically have nothing to do with housework itself, but the roles within housework. If your role, mine, is to do the laundry, that is my role, plain and simple. There is nothing to go on about. You have to find what the role is with housework, or housework will be a continual fight. I will sit down with both of my kids every Sunday and say, this is what my work week is looking like. I don't have a super crazy week this week. So you guys, whatever you need to do this week, take care of it. I'm going to go ahead and take all of the housework on. And me and my kids know what that means when I say all housework. However, if I have a week that's really busy, me and my kids have found that my role as the mom is to make a list for each one of my kids. And we have a very specific place in the house that we set it. So let's say I have a crazy week and my older daughter, her job is to take out the laundry, to pick up her room, and to wipe the countertops down in the bathroom. I will write that out for her. And then same with my youngest daughter, clean the litter box, take out the bathroom garbages, put the dishes away, right? Very simple things, but that is how it works. So there is no fight over housework. I did my role. My role was writing it down for you guys. Your role was completing it. If something changes throughout the week, and let's say I have an even crazier schedule, I might have to add more onto that list. Or if I find out that, something happens and I have a day that's not so crazy anymore, like I once thought, I can say, hey, Don't worry about your list today. I've got it. So it's just that constant communication of what is your role. But we know no matter how crazy my week is, laundry is my thing. That is just something we've established. It works for me in my household that the laundry is kind of always mine. That is my role. Because if I write everything down on a list and my daughter doesn't do it, the argument is not, oh my gosh, you didn't get your chores done. No, you didn't fulfill your role. I did my part. Why did you not do your part? And you can imagine if she doesn't get her list done, look at what my thought process, my emotional process, and behavioral process can become, especially if I'm having a crazy busy week. My thoughts are you kidding me? What is going on? I cannot believe she didn't get those done. I didn't even give her that much. My emotions become frustrated, disappointed, annoyed, infuriated. And then my behaviors is I'm ready to essentially rip her head off, essentially, right? Emotion, mind. If you haven't watched my video on the 3 states of mind, go back and watch that. You can go very emotion-minded very quickly. You have to know your role, okay? It's the same with intimacy and sex. You have to know what your role is. If one of the partners is into something, you know, I'm not going to get super explicit, but if somebody is into a certain thing and it's the wife's role to fulfill that certain thing, then that has to be a conversation. That role has to be done. If you're avoiding sex or intimacy, that's your role to get that fixed. Like something is not quite right. If you don't have a role with housework and there's a continual argument about housework, your role is not working somewhere. Okay. If there's arguments about money in the household or there's fear surrounding money, something's not quite right. Okay. Again, at the end of this, I will kind of give my email out. So if you want more worksheets on this, education on this, links on this to read more about this, if you want a one-on-one session to kind of go through one-on-one what this would look like for you, I'm totally open to that. But these are some of the biggest roles that I see get misconstrued. Okay. So types of roles. I added this in here. I typically don't do this with this particular activity in individual therapy, but I do think it's important. And since I was making a video on it, I wanted to include it. There are some different roles within the family. There are 6 of them listed here. Yes, there are more. But again, these are some of the ones that I see the most in therapy. Again, we typically don't get into this until you've done this activity like 3 or 4 times. But while I was making a video on it, I just wanted to touch on it really fast and just kind of read what I put so you can kind of see how it comes together. Okay, so the hero. The individual in the system that allows the system to continue and an everything is fine notion, despite there being a serious ongoing issues. This can lead to overachieving behaviors and feeling like efforts are never enough. So watch for that person in your system. Who's the hero? Is it you? Are you the hero? Because if you are, you're going to feel burned out a lot of the time. Okay. The lost child. This is the individual in the system that is often ignored and can feel invisible. This can lead to deflated self-esteem and worth, causing one to essentially overwork to build up their esteem and their worth. Okay. So again, watch for that as you go through and do this wheel. Again, we don't get into this for a long time. I just wanted to kind of touch on it so you could see, one, that yes, there is a name to some of the roles that you might see in your family. And number 2, what can actually happen? Because remember, this can affect thoughts, feelings, behaviors. Okay. If you go back to the first one, the hero, overachieving behaviors. Okay. Feeling like efforts are never enough. So there's behavior and feeling right there. That was affected. Okay. The lost child, deflated self-esteem. Okay. Your self-esteem is essentially your thought process about yourself. Worth. Okay. That's essentially, what do I think of my worth? Okay. Causing one to overwork. Overworking is a behavior. Okay. So can you see how some of these roles can take on thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in other people and yourself? Okay. The caretaker, the individual who maintains the balance of the system at the expense of their own needs. This can result in overcompensating to ensure the system stays happy. So they ultimately feel like their worth is based on how useful they are as a caretaker. I will argue the caretaker is one of the hardest roles for people to break away from. Okay. The peacemaker. This is the individual in your system that is often found in the middle of conflict, trying to maintain the peace. So this can result in an overcompensation by going back and forth between members and ultimately starting to choose sides. Again, we've all seen someone like that in our system. Every single one of these roles, mind you, is not healthy. Okay. Even though it's like, oh, the caretaker, we all need a caretaker. Correct. But these are not healthy. None of these roles are healthy. That's why I've put them in here. Okay. My next video is going to explain, great, you've taught me about roles. I've gone through my system. I can see how these roles aren't making sense. What the hell do I do with them now? That's going to be the next video. It's called the drama triangle. Okay. So stay tuned for that one. Okay. The addict. This is the individual who affects every single other person in the system. I mean, the addict is essentially a giant ripple effect. Some of these other ones you see mostly just in your intermediate family, right? Like I was talking about, really focus on just people that you live with in the beginning. But the addict role, if you have ever struggled with an addict in your family, whether it be pornography, substance use, food, whatever it is, you know that the addict goes very beyond just your immediate system. It can affect every single person down to a third cousin, for example. Like the addict is a ripple effect, probably the biggest ripple effect of all of these. Okay. They can be seen as the tension of the system. So a core piece of tension can come from the addict. They overcompensate by using substances or food or sex or pornography to avoid pain, essentially. Okay. They don't ever really get to the root of the problem. People don't wake up and say, I'm going to use drugs. No, that's not how that works. Okay. There has been a lot of things happen. And you can even see like the lost child. If somebody was in the lost child role a lot of their life that led to deflated self-esteem and worth, it's not going to be a surprise that they now slip into the addict role as they get older and older and exposed to more and more and more. That's not surprising. Okay. None of these are healthy. Okay. The golden child. Child who lives up to the expectations of their parents and caregivers to maintain happiness. So they overcompensate by falling into perfectionist behaviors. So a lot of people that I see that have the core belief, I am perfect. If you have not watched my video on core beliefs, please do so. That is why I do what I do. That is my passion, is core beliefs. If anybody comes in my office or sees me individually and they have an I have to be perfect core belief, I always keep it in the back of my mind to go back and look at the role that they had during childhood. Because the golden child absolutely can fall into perfectionist behaviors, but so can the lost child. So can the hero. So can the caretaker. So I always kind of put it in the back of my mind that when we come to the part of therapy where we do roles, I always want to look and see what role that they had growing up and continue to have throughout their life, because it can be detrimental. Again, all 6 of these roles, this is just an example to kind of show you, yes, there are names to go with certain roles. None of them are healthy. None of them are good. I hope that you can see that all of them can cause a big, big problem. Okay. They do have names. They cause problems. You see the overcompensation. Okay. So how to fix your role. Okay. Recognition is key. I tell people in individual therapy all the time, if you want the keys to the kingdom, and the keys to the kingdom is essentially mental freedom. If you want the keys to the kingdom, recognition is your key. But you have to keep in mind, let's take that kind of more literal. And let's say that I just bought a brand new house and it's a brand new build from the ground up. It's brand new. And it comes that it's done and I get the keys in my hand. It's like, well, I got the keys. Let's go. When I go put the key in that door and open it for the first time, I'm not going to walk into a fully furnished, decorated house. I'm going to walk into a house that's been built, but it's not necessarily a home because I haven't made it my own. So the keys to the kingdom is only step 1. So don't get too excited, but recognition is your key to fixing your role. Every single video that I have, whether it's number 1 through 13, whether you purchased the workbook, whether it's roles, the drama triangle, some other videos I have planned going into the new year, every single one of my videos can connect to one another. So if you have not watched my other videos, your recognition with this video only is only going to go so far. Okay, so I highly encourage you to watch the previous videos, purchase the workbook, get some one-on-one sessions with myself so your recognition can get better and better and better, because you cannot open that house. You cannot have the keys to the kingdom if you don't recognize. So if you're just going to use this video, if you can't understand who's in your system, your intermediate system, if you do not have the self-discipline to write out who's in your system and to write out what tensions arise and to see who hasn't met the role, whether it's you or the other person hasn't met their role, you're never going to get anywhere. There's no recognition there. This does have a little bit of work that the other person has to put in. I, as the therapist, do everything in my power to give you all the education as simple as possible without changing myself. I really, really try hard. I try to give a ton of options to how to get in contact with me. I've tried to do cheap virtual sessions. I've tried to do everything in my power to give people this information fast, effective, and as cheap as I can possibly. I mean, literally 60% cheaper than what you'll find in the cash pay market across the United States, essentially. But the people that are going to do this, you have a role to play too, and your role is doing the work to recognize. If you don't recognize, forget the keys to the kingdom. I tell all of my people that come through my door, you want to fix yourself, you want the keys to the kingdom, recognition. Okay? Take some time to identify your role, the different parts in your system, the tensions. Okay? Look at that. You cannot fix what you do not recognize. Okay? Next, core belief dismantling. As you can see, if your role is not met, it affects thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. If you've watched my other videos, you've learned thoughts, feelings, and behaviors actually come from a core belief system. If you dismantle the core belief, you dismantle your role automatically by itself. Okay, for the most part. Yes, there are some other things we can add to that, but for the most part, you dismantle the core belief, a lot of things in your life will level out. If you have not watched my core belief video, again, please go back and do so. That is way too much to get into in this video. But if you remember, core beliefs dictate how people think, feel, and behave. So if you have a negative core belief system that's not dismantled, no shit, your role's not met. Like that, it's obvious, right? Like the role is not met if your core belief system's not dismantled. They go hand in hand, but you definitely, I mean, regardless if you do this activity or not, you want to dismantle the core beliefs. You dismantle that, a lot of other things in your life will level out. If you want more information about core beliefs, feel free to go and watch my video on core beliefs. I can't remember exactly what video number it is, but it should be labeled core beliefs. If you have any questions, comments, concerns on this video, if you want more education on systems theory, if you want worksheets on this, if you want me to send you the bike wheel that I send to people when we first do this, the smaller bike wheel, feel free. I will give you anything that I can. If you want to book a session with me, you can do so at my website at www.redefinedtherapyandcoaching.com. If you have my personal phone number, you are welcome to text me and set up a session there. If you see me in person in my office and you're watching this video and you would like more information, by all means, bring your questions with you. We can get that. My email, utlcsw@gmail.com. Again, questions, comments, concerns, more education. You want to set up a one-on-one session, feel free to email me. I will get back to you as soon as I can with anything. Stay tuned. We're going to dive into the drama triangle, which is going to take these roles and essentially give you a lot bigger deep dive of how to A, recognize, and B, get out of some of these tensions that you might be feeling in your family. Okay. Thank you guys, as always, so much for watching.